We have a crisis in the world, tremendous crisis, and also crisis in our consciousness, in us. I see the urgency of change, radical revolution, mutation in the mind. I see it. It is necessary. There is complete quietness of the mind, and that which is silent has vast space. Only then that which is nameless comes into being.
This is Urgency of Change, the Krishnamurti podcast. When there is grief, we try every form of escape, but it's always there. Apparently, humanity has not resolved grief. Hello and welcome to episode 262 of Urgency of Change. Each fortnightly episode of the Krishnamurti podcast is based on a significant theme of Krishnamurti's talks. Extracts from the archives have been selected to represent his different approaches to these universal and timelessly relevant themes. This episode's theme is grief and loss. Upcoming episodes are mechanical living, talent, and intuition. This is a podcast from Krishnamurti Foundation Trust, based at Brockwood Park in the UK, which is also home to the Krishnamurti Retreat Centre. Situated in the beautiful countryside of the South Downs National Park, the Krishnamurti Centre offers retreats individually and in groups. The focus is on inquiry in light of Krishnamurti's teachings. Please visit krishnamurticentre.org.uk for more information, including our volunteer programme. You can also find our regular Krishnamurti quotes and videos on Instagram, TikTok and Facebook at Krishnamurti Foundation Trust. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review or rating on your podcast app. This episode on grief and loss has 4 sections. This first extract is from Krishnamurti's first talk in Amsterdam 1981 and is titled Living with Grief.
One of our causes of disorder in our life is sorrow. This is a common factor, common reality in all human beings. Everyone goes through this tragedy of sorrow, here or in the Asiatic world or in the Western world. Again, this is a common thing we all share. There is not only so-called personal sorrow, but there is the sorrow of mankind. Sorrow which wars have brought about. $5,000 of historical record, every year there's been a war. Killing each other. Violent, terror, brutality, maiming people, people who have no hands, eyes, and so all the horrors and the brutality of war, which has brought incalculable misery to mankind. It's not only one's own sorrow, but the sorrow of mankind, the sorrow when you see a man who has nothing whatsoever, just a piece of cloth, and for the rest of one's life he's going to be that way. Not in these Western countries, but the Asiatic world, it's like that. And when you see that person, there is sorrow. There is also sorrow when people are caught in illusion, like going from one guru to another, which is escaping from yourself. That's a sorrow to observe this. The clever people going off to the East, writing books about it, praising some guru, and we all fall for that nonsense. That's also sorrow. Sorrow that comes when you see what the politicians are doing in the world, thinking in terms of tribalism. That's also sorrow. So there is personal sorrow and the vast cloud of sorrow of mankind. Sorrow is not something romantic, sentimental, illogical. It's there. My son dies and it has shattered one's life. And we have lived with this sorrow from time measureless. And apparently, one has not resolved this problem. When one suffers, one seeks consolation, which is an escape from the fact of sorrow. When there is that grief, you try every form of amusement, escape, but it's always there. And apparently, humanity has not resolved it. And we are asking the question whether it is possible to be free of it completely. Not avoiding it, not seeking consolation, not escaping into some fanciful theory, but to live with it. Just let's understand what we mean by that word, live with it. Not let it become a habit, like most people do. They live with nationalities, which is most destructive. They live with their own separate religious conclusions. They live with their own fanciful ideas and ideals. And that again brings their own conflict. So to live with something, to live with sorrow, not accept it, not become habituated to it. That is to look at it, to observe it, without any escape, without any question of trying to go beyond it, just to hold it in your hand and look. Which is, sorrow is also part of this tremendous sense of loneliness. You may have many friends, you may be married, you may have all kinds of things, but inwardly there is this feeling of complete loneliness. And as part of sorrow, to live with that, to observe that loneliness, without any direction, without trying to go beyond it, without trying to find a substitute for it. To live with it, not worship it, not become psychotic about it. So, which means to give all your attention to that pain, to that grief, to that sorrow. So when my son dies, or somebody whom I think I love dies, there is great grief. And without running away from it, just to, it's a great thing to suffer, not great thing to suffer, to understand suffering. Because then, where there is freedom from sorrow, there is compassion. And one is not compassionate as long as you are anchored to any belief, to a particular form of religious symbol. Compassion is freedom from sorrow. And where there is compassion, there is love. And with that compassion goes intelligence. Not the intelligence of thought with its cunning, with its adjustments, with its capacity to put up with anything. Compassion means the ending of sorrow. And only then there is intelligence.
The second extract is from the fifth talk in Saanen 1981 and is titled, Why is There Grief and Hurt?
Must also talk over together the other factor which exists in our consciousness, which is sorrow, grief, pain, and the wound, the hurts that exist in most human beings from childhood. The hurt, from that hurt, psychological hurt, the pain of it, the remembrance of it, the holding on to it, and the grief that arises from it. And also, there is grief involved, sorrow involved in it. And also there is the global sorrow of mankind, which have faced thousands and thousands of wars. Millions and millions of people have cried. And this war machine is still going on, directed by the politicians, by our nationalism, by our feeling that we are separate from the rest, we and they, you and me. That's the global sorrow, which the politicians are building. And we are ready for another war. I hope there won't be, but when you are preparing for something, there must be some kind of explosion somewhere. It may not be in the Middle East, it may happen here. As long as you are preparing for something, you're going to get it. Like preparing food. But we are so, if I may use the word without disrespect, we are so stupid to allow all this to go on. Terrorism, you know the whole of it. So, we are asking, perhaps we shall continue with it next, day after tomorrow. We are asking whether this whole pattern of being hurt, lonely, pain, resistance, withdrawal, isolation, which causes further pain, grief, sorrow of my son's death, sorrow of losing something, losing some precious belief that I've held, the disillusionment that comes when I've followed somebody. One has given one's life, one's endeavor, or struggled to somebody, surrendered oneself to something, and then get disillusioned. And from that, pain, anxiety, uncertainty, sorrow. You have noticed all this. That's the pattern of our consciousness. When one asks, is it possible ever to be free of all this? It is possible if we apply, not endlessly talk about it. If I realize that I am hurt from childhood, psychologically, and see all the consequences of that hurt. The consequences are, I resist, I withdraw, I don't want to be hurt anymore. I encourage isolation. And therefore, I'm building a wall around myself. And my wife also is hurt. And she is doing the same thing. Right? I don't know if you realize all these things. So that is the consequences of being hurt from childhood is pain, resistance, withdrawal, isolation, more and more deeper and deeper fear. And the global sorrow of mankind. I don't know if you have ever thought about it even. How man, human being, has been tortured through wars. Tortured under dictatorship, totalitarianism, tortured in different parts of the world. And also, there is the sorrow of my brother, son, wife running away or dying, and the sorrow of separation, the sorrow, that comes about when one is interested in something completely and the other is not. You follow? In this sorrow, there is no compassion. There is no love. And the ending of sorrow brings love. Not pleasure, not desire, love. And where there is love, there is compassion. With compassion comes intelligence, which has nothing whatever to do with the intelligence of thought. So, one has to look very closely at ourselves as humanity. Why? We have borne all these things all our lives. Why we have never ended it? Is it part of our indolence? Part of our habit? And if you say it's part of our habit, part of our conditioning, what am I to do about it? Let's talk about it. How am I to uncondition myself? Keep at it. That's what we're all doing. I can't find the answer, I'll go to the guru next door, or further away, or priest, or this or that. We never say, look, let me look at myself closely and see if break through it, like any habit. If you have a habit of smoking, it can be broken very easily. Or drugs, alcohol. But we say, what does it matter? I'm getting old anyhow, the body is destroying itself, so little more pleasure, what does it matter? So we carry on. We don't feel utterly responsible for all the things we do. We either blame on the environment, on society, on our parents, on the past history. You follow? It is genetic, some excuse, but never applying. And if one really says, the urge, the immediate urge to find out why I am hurt, why one is hurt. One is hurt because one has built an image about oneself. That's a fact. When you say, I am hurt, it's the image that you have about yourself. Somebody comes along and puts his heavy boot on that image, and you get hurt. Right? You get hurt through comparison. I am this, but somebody else is better. As long as one has an image about oneself, you're going to get hurt. That's a fact. But if you pay attention to that fact, that as long as you have an image of any kind, somebody is going to put a pin into it. As long as I have an image about myself, because I address lots of people, big audience, becoming stupidly famous in the world, and all that rot that goes on with reputation, and I want to maintain that, you're going to hurt it. Somebody has bigger audience, you follow? So I get hurt. So if you give complete attention to the image that you have about yourself, attention, not concentration, give attention, then you will see the image has no meaning, it disappears.
The third extract is from Krishnamurti's sixth talk in Saanen 1982 and is titled, Is There an End to Grief and Suffering?
Thought has put together the content of our consciousness, our gods, our rituals, our behavior, all the things that thought has invented, both outwardly and inwardly. And we went into the question, what is thinking, what is the nature of thought. Because all of us live, most of us, on the activity of thought. And part of thought is our sorrow. And whether thought can ever end sorrow. You say, a question. I suffer. Suppose I suffer. An ordinary man living in some country, surrounded by lots of idiocy and so on. I suffer. My son is dead. Or the person whom I think I love has gone. In this detachment, in this isolation, because I have lost something which I've held dear, I've been attached to that person or to that idea, and that idea is shattered by reason, logic, sane observation. And also my son has been dead, disappeared entirely from this earth, and I suffer. And together, please, as we said, we are inquiring together. The speaker is not at all important. He is totally, completely anonymous. He has no authority. But together we are going to inquire into the nature of suffering. Suddenly I find myself isolated completely. I've depended on my son or on my wife or girlfriend and so on. And one day I've lost him, her. And sorrow, pain, grief is my lot, as the lot of all human beings and living on the earth. And what am I to do? Bear the suffering, which most of us do, in isolation, or escape from that suffering through some form of drug, whether that drug be a concept, a future projected formula that I'll meet him when I die. All those forms sort of escape from reality. The reality is that I suffer. I am not escaping from that suffering, nor seeking comfort. I hope we are together in this. Because when one seeks comfort, when there is sorrow, there's an escape from actuality, from that actual state of suffering. There are various forms of comfort. Belief, rationalization, inquiring deeply into oneself. All those forms of observation is another form of escape. So can I, with my tears, with my longing for my son, wife, or girlfriend, or the lost beliefs and ideals, can I remain? Can the mind or the brain remain with that suffering? What we mean by remaining is not to escape from, in any form, from the actual pain, the real grief, which brings about tears. Life then becomes utterly meaningless. As I have been so dependent, attached, and that which I have been attached to is gone. And I suddenly realize how utterly lonely I am. I have lost, as all human beings have lost, something that I held very closely, dearly. And I find myself totally isolated. So what is the relationship between love, isolation, and grief, sorrow? What is the relationship to suffering? What's the relationship of suffering to love? I love my son. And if love brings sorrow, is that love? Is sorrow part of love? As jealousy, as fear, anxiety, is that the nature of love? Or love has nothing whatsoever to do, has no relationship whatsoever with sorrow? Please, we are inquiring together. We are examining so that we find the actual reality of love and suffering. The speaker is not stating something which you have to accept or deny. We are examining together. Therefore it's neither yours nor mine. It's examination. Like a scientist examining the cause of a cancer. If he's rather shoddy scientist, then his personal interest is involved in that examination, which distorts that examination. Whereas we are now ordinary human beings with all our daily problems, and one of them is sorrow. And whether sorrow can ever end, or it is the lot of man is there the ending of this thing, and in the ending is the brain seeking a further result. I hope you're all following all this carefully. I may end sorrow, which requires a great deal of understanding of one's own consciousness, the consciousness of mankind, to go into that very deeply, which means by the thought, which is the central factor, the contributory element in putting together the whole structure of consciousness. What is the relationship of thought to sorrow? Therefore, one has to ask, what is the relationship of desire, which is for most of us the actuality? What is the relationship of desire to love? And where there is desire, the urge to fulfill the energy of that desire, will it end sorrow? Or the understanding of all causation, the investigation of all causation. You follow? Our life is based on causation. I do this because in doing this I'll get a reward. If I do this I'll be punished. So our life is essentially based on various causes. And where there is a cause, there must be an end. So we cling to causation. I wonder if you're following all this. You understand? Causation, the motive, the result, the reward, the punishment. That's our life. And so our life is a process of cause and effect. From that effect becomes the cause. And so it's a perpetual chain. And thought realizes this, if you are at all aware of all this. And what is life without a cause? Can one live without a cause? Suffering has a cause, which is my desire to be attached, my desire to possess. In that possession I feel safe. In holding on to a belief, there is certain security. So there is always this process of cause and effect. So the cause of suffering is my movement of self-centered isolation. This is obvious. There are two wars are going on at present. In Lebanon, Iraq and Iran. They're all human beings. They have isolated themselves as the Israelis, the Iranians, and the Iraq. They have isolated themselves. In that isolation, they thought there is security. That isolation is bringing about tremendous wars throughout the world, in the past and in the present, and probably in the future. So wherever there is isolation, there must be grief. There must be conflict. This is a law, this is so. And our whole life is a process of isolation. So there is conflict, there is grief, there is sorrow. So then one asks, is it possible to live in this world without a cause and without isolation? Right? And therefore one asks, has love a cause? Please ask yourself, the speaker is only verbalizing what you asking, what you want, what your inquiry is. Has love a cause? Has intelligence the capacity to observe very clearly, without any distortion, without any bias, without the previous knowledge which guides, to observe so closely? There's no cause. So, love has no cause. And can one live in this world which is appalling, so utterly destructive? Can one live in this world with that intelligence which has no cause and that love which has no cause? Which means, can one live in this world with complete compassion? Compassion can only be when you don't, thought doesn't belong to any group, any association, any isolation.
The final extract in this episode is from the fourth talk in Ojai 1979 and is titled Understanding the Deep Causes of Sorrow.
Why has man, throughout the ages, from ancient of days, suffered? Understand? This is really a very important question. And apparently man has never ended sorrow. Right? Christianity has escaped from it by saying somebody else suffers for me. And all the Redeemer, the whole business of it. And the Asiatics have translated it by saying it's your past karma, which is past action, past life, for which you are paying now. If you behave properly, next life you will live in a palace. Or better, instead of becoming a bootblack, you will be a lawyer. And so on, which is self-improvement. See the danger of both of these tricks we play upon each other. Escaping through an ideology from suffering, through a concept, through an image, and the other, explanation of sorrow because of the past. That is, the cause, the event. But the event becomes the cause. Cause. No? Have you understood this? No. Must everything be explained? Look, there is the cause and the effect. But the effect modifies itself, which then becomes the cause for another effect. So it's a constant cause-effect, cause-effect. The effect becomes the cause all the time. And man, you, we human beings, whether we live here or in Asia or in India or anywhere else, we have this extraordinary burden of sorrow. Not only this so-called personal sorrow, but the collective sorrow of mankind. Isn't there such, you understand? The poor man in a little village in India can never have hot bath, clean clothes, have knowledge, can never ride in an aeroplane, can never see the beauty of the earth, because he's toiling. And the thousands of people who have been killed in war, and their mothers, their girlfriends, their wives weeping, you follow? There is the sorrow of the world, as well as your own little sorrow. I don't know if you have gone into this, even thought about it. We're only concerned with our own little sorrows, with our own tears. I have hay fever, that's all. It's not. So there is not only personal, immediate sorrow of various kinds. The ultimate sorrow is death. Death of someone whom you think you love, whom you think, on whom you have depended, who have been a companion, and so on. But also there is this immense collective sorrow of mankind. So we're asking whether this sorrow can ever end. Because if it doesn't end, there is no love. Cannot have a good society. There can be no goodness. So one must find out not only one's own personal sorrow, whether it can end, or also not to contribute to the vast collective sorrow. Please, sir, this is very, very serious. It's not a thing you play with. It's not a thing you argue and have opposing camps about sorrow. Nobody, no Redeemer, no Savior has ever helped man to free from sorrow. They have helped to escape from sorrow. So we are asking a very, very serious question. And only a very serious mind, a mind that has gone through all that we have discussed, can find out or ask the serious question whether the sorrow, our own particular, personal, limited sorrow, and whether it's possible not to add to the vast stream of sorrow. So, what is sorrow? Now, sir, in asking a question of this kind, and asking questions which you have asked previously, the question is not, and the inquiry is not an analytical process. It is not analysis. You understand? I must explain this a little bit. Analysis implies division, the analyzer and the analyzed. The analyzer is the past, right? What he has learned from Freud and, the whole psychological knowledge and the various divisions in this professional psychological structure. So, the analyzer is different from the analyzed. Is that so? Or the analyzer is the analyzed? Please inquire, sir. Right? Of course it is. I am examining my inhibition, if I have any, and I'm analyzing it. Go back to my childhood or something or other, past incident, and I'm analyzing it, right? So there is a division. And we are saying the analyzer is the analyzed. That is that is seeing the truth that the division is illusory. Right? The analyzer is the analyzed. The experiencer is the experience. Right? You following all this? We say, I must have experience. We are searching for bigger, wider, nobler, extensive, godly experiences, mystic experience. All that's, which shows that the experiencer is different from that which he is experiencing. In that process, the experience must recognize the experience. Otherwise, it won't be experience. So the very recognition is the remembrance of something which is had. So the experiencer is the experience. The thinker is the thought. Thought is not different from the thinker. So the analyzer is the analyzed. It's good enough for the moment to discard it or take it. It is a fact, we go into it. So when we ask a question, we are not analyzing. We are observing. In the observation, there is no analysis because you are observing and the thing is revealing itself. You are not telling it, it is telling you. So there is only pure observation. So in the same way we're asking the question, why man, human man who is the repository of 1,000 years of sorrow, not only personal, but this collective burden of sorrow. And why mankind has put up with it. Probably he's not been able to solve it. He hasn't the capacity to say, look, I don't know what to do with this thing. I suffer, I cry, I know I'm lonely, I wanted success, I've failed. You follow? Grief, sorrow, this sense of frustration, inhibition, all that's implied in that one word and more. And we know, and in asking, we are saying, we are observing, not analyzing. Why has man put up with this thing, tolerated it? You don't tolerate a toothache. You do something about it immediately. But man has not done this, has not freed himself from this. Is it because he's incapable? Or he has so accepted it, it has become a habit, and so he says, I can't solve it. I can't free myself from it. As I can't, please help me. He says, God, Christ, Krishna, Buddha, somebody outside, please take away my sorrow. And that hasn't worked either. One can escape into it, but that is not an actuality. It's there. You may go to church every Saturday, or have prayed 5 times a day, but it's there. So we are now asking why, man, you have not resolved it. What is sorrow? Please answer it. Put that question to yourself. What is sorrow? The loss of somebody? Loss of your particular wishes, your desires? Loss of somebody on whom you have relied? Loss of companionship? Is sorrow this enormous sense of isolation, loneliness? So what we're asking, what is the relationship between the me and the you? In essence, the me that shed tears when you are not there, right? The me that seeks fulfillment in something or other, noble or ignoble, imaginary or reality, and the fulfillment is denied, and I feel frustrated, inhibited, miserable, depressed. Is that the reason of sorrow? Or one has really never lived with sorrow. Lived, not run away from it. You understand my question? Please understand this. One has not rationally explained it away. Logically said, yes, that was the cause, this is the effect, and therefore I suffer. You follow? We are asking, not analyzing, are all these the reason of sorrow, the cause of sorrow? Or is there something much deeper than the peripheral incidents that bring about sorrow? You understand? most of us are caught in the peripheral accidents that bring about grief. And we're trying to resolve those outward incidents, and not being able to resolve them, we escape. But perhaps we have resolved them, but there may be much deeper cause for this enormous, endless sorrow of man. What is that deep cause? You see, sir, I'm inquiring. The speaker is inquiring. Are you inquiring too? You understand my question? Or are you only concerned with the peripheral sorrows of fulfillment, not fulfilling? I am angry, my wife leaves me and my husband goes away. You follow? Is that the petty little sorrows that we have collected and say that's sorrow. And we want to be free of those. That's very easy. Those are petty, rather immature, and they can be let aside. We can resolve them quite easily. But we're asking, is there a deep cause for this abiding, everlasting sorrow of man? If the speaker points out the cause, and there is a cause which the speaker has discovered, what value has it to you? This is not a trick I'm playing. What will it do to you if I tell you this is it, this is the real, this is the truth why mankind suffers? What will you do with it? You understand? Or will you say that, yes, that's a very good idea. I must think about it. It perhaps might help me to get rid of my sorrow. You follow? So somebody gives you a precious jewel. What will you do with it? You understand? And what will you pay for it? Naturally. If you are merely paying with the coin of thought, then it's valueless. It's no longer a jewel. But if you say, the jewel is the thing, the most precious in my life, I must hold it, I must look at it. Then you are giving your heart, your mind, your blood, everything to hold to that. So what is the deep cause of mankind? Cause which brings such enormous burden of sorrow, not only the personal, but this vast collective burden. Do you want me to tell you? Huh? Be clear, please. Don't just shake your head. Be very clear. That you have accepted the question, you understand? That you have received the question with all your mind, with your heart, with your whole being. Because that's the most vital question that will totally resolve not only the petty problems, resolve the conflict of man. You follow? If you receive that question completely, the question itself is the answer. Right? I wonder if you see this. See, sir, if you ask the question, either you are expecting someone to answer it, or you are thinking, right? Trying to find an answer. But thinking or waiting for somebody else to answer your question is not going to resolve it. Right? So how you receive the question is important. How you approach the question. If your approach is holistic, complete, then the answer is there. But if you say, well, tell me about it, lean back and wait, or ask your priest or your guru or your book or your authority to tell you, then it's no meaning. They have told you 1,000 times. So, it's like, sir, like in a lake, you drop a stone. The lake is so still, and you drop a stone, and the waves go on. The question is that stone that you drop in the lake.